Barry, it's your big day today.
Oh, forget it.
I know, Barry, this is a guest you've wanted for so long, Barry. Michael Garfield is on the show today.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I know. He's the host of Complexity and Future Fossils. And anyway, I'll introduce him in a second. But I got to play the intro music real quick because my iPad's about to die. In fact, let's just start like we normally do. Oh my! All right. Welcome to as I fade out the music quickly, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show where our iPads are dying. Wait, it's still playing? No. Okay, welcome to the show. My name is Chris Curran. On this show, we talk about podcast production in depth. So the actual audio production of podcasts, we go really, really deep into it because I'm an audio engineer. I've been producing podcasts for many years, and I've been producing music for like 30 plus years or something, which sounds weird because I don't feel that old. But anyway, if you listen to the show, if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcasts will sound a lot better and you'll spend less time producing them. Of course, Barry is with me. Barry, do you want to leave the room for this interview?
No way. You crazy?
Okay, I thought so. I mean, Michael Garfield's here. I know you love him, but anyway, real quick, the next semester of Podcast Engineering School starts in 2021. So if you want to learn how to do all this stuff at the highest professional level, check that out. So Michael Garfield is here. Michael, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to have you. I found your podcast because, well, your one show, which is called Complexity, which you host that show for the Santa Fe Institute, and I'm very much into complexity and chaos and fractals, and actually I took a course at the Santa Fe Institute a few years ago. It was online, of course, but it was a course on complexity. It was an entry level course, but I am so into all that stuff. So when I found your show, I was like, "Oh, this is just the greatest thing ever." and you do it really well. You have on great guests, and you go. The Complexity Show is probably the deepest podcast that I've ever heard. It's just you guys really go deep into stuff, so I appreciate it. So anyway, that's why I reached out to you, and that's why I invited you on this show. So I'm happy you're here. I'll also put a few other things in your bio, the links in the show notes. You're also the host of Future Fossils, which is your personal show. You're also a musical artist. You write songs and produce songs and play guitar. So I'll link to that. I'll link to your Spotify and everything. So I don't know. It seems like you and I have a bunch in common, like music, creativity, complexity, chaos. Are you into fractals too?
Doubtlessly. Yeah.
Right?
My father worked for Universal Studios when Jurassic Park came out. I was at the world premiere. Wow. So, I read the book first, actually. So, Michael Crichton's dragon mandala kind of, the fractal dragon in that book was a companion through my entire childhood. That's
cool. And so now at SFI, you're doing social media strategy and doing the podcast as well. So, and you have a long academic bio, which I'm not going to read, but it'll be in the show notes. So if you're an academic and you want to know what Michael's done and all that, so it'll be in the show notes. So let's start with the speed round, Michael. The speed round is where you tell us when you're about to record a podcast, just walk us through your equipment and your process very quickly, and then we'll spend the rest of the episode sort of picking through it.
Sure. I mean, I'm probably not doing it the right way, quote unquote.
Oh man.
But I use a biodynamic M88TG. It's a kick drum mic. It's like flat EQ, completely flat. They actually individually EQ each mic and then print out the EQ for you so you can see it.
Oh, wow.
So I purchased this microphone to use for looping performances, actually, initially. And had the customer representative, like the store guy, put the mic on the speaker, like put it on the amp, and there was no feedback, and I was impressed. I was like, okay, let's go with this one then. because relentlessly, the problem as a looping musician is that you catch feedback and it amplifies in it, and it's actually kind of part of this superlinearity of complex systems, right? Like there's a feedback loop, and so it just spills out. But this mic goes through a Scarlett 4i4 into Ableton Live is how I edit my stuff, because again, musical in principle, and I'm working on a Macbook Pro and using Roland cables. Yeah.
And what, okay, so Ableton Live, and then real quick, do you use like any plugins or anything within Ableton Live?
I mean, the iZotope suite of effects, actually, I find really helpful for like denoise and de-reverb. I use those considerably when I'm recording with guests that they don't have, they're in boxy spaces or weird environments. It's challenging. My preference is to get a mic on someone in the right spot. You can't control this.
Right.
Like I would love to actually sit down. It's been interesting locally during the pandemic. I've been able to do a couple of interviews and like go to the person's apartment and sit across the table from them.
Wow.
And
luxury.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. But, the 2 mic setup is ideal. You get the Yeti Nano, which SFI just purchased for us so we can have a remote second point, so that even if we have to do remote interviews in town with, like just drop the mic off at somebody's house.
Right.
And then let them plug and play, just to make sure that they're in a good spot, that they're not just using earbuds, microphones. It's amazing. The problem of trying to capture people, I mean, it's in a way, it's like butterfly biology or something. You're like, it's like you got to go to where they are and deal with the conditions as they exist. And so the tools that you use, they make a big difference.
Yeah. Oh, we're all right. We're going to talk about that, dropping the mics off at the guests' houses. So I guess there are enough people living locally in Santa Fe that you want to interview, I guess, right?
Well, I mean, for Complexity Podcasts, we have a residential faculty, and then we have an external faculty at the Santa Fe Institute. So
I see.
Probably 90% of the people that I have available, the pool of potential interviewees exists somewhere else entirely. But under normal circumstances, there's a lot of flow through the campus.
Right.
And people coming through for talks and working groups, conferences. And it's easy to catch people on site in those cases. However, this year has been obviously a challenge. And so, we make we catch as catch can.
Right. That's good though. You have all those people or at least a bunch of people locally you can do that with, because it really does make a big difference. Okay, and then Complexity, the show, is hosted with Simplecast. So then you just mix it down in Ableton, and then you mix it down to MP3, and then upload it to Simplecast, right?
Totally.
Okay. And do you publish your show in mono or stereo? Curious.
It's stereo.
Okay. Yeah, well, most podcasts are not stereo, right? I think most are mono. But I can never stand the fact that if you put out your podcast in mono, then any music you play is in becomes mono, and it just doesn't sound right. Whatever Neil Young has to say about mono, yeah.
For what it's worth, right now, I only hear you in my right ear. I'm like wearing these studio headphones, the Beat Studio Pro, and I'm only getting Chris in one ear. But audio is so bizarre and confounding because of the diversity of speakers and listening contexts, situations. The audio, the podcast is just one of many things that I do for SFI that involves like media production, and we get a lot of feedback from people about the videos that we post, and it's just bizarre. People complaining about audio problems that they're having constantly, and it takes a lot of time to figure out, is it because you're on a different, is it mono stereo, or is it because the device that they're listening to has some sort of like auto compression built in, or it's a lot of this is out of our control. Yeah, you're right. There's I even feel that, like, coming from a music background, from a studio background, right? Like in the 90s, I was making records, and the world was obviously different back then, but with computers and with all this different gear and with all this different ways to connect with people, I think you're absolutely right. It gets confusing. I mean, ask anyone who has bought Audio Hijack and Loopback for their Mac, and they want to create like a bunch of virtual instruments to send different mixes to different people. It is really confusing. And then, like you said, right now you can only hear me in one ear, and that's actually a little bit strange, but your headphones are plugged into your Scarlett 4i4? Yeah.
Okay.
No, the headphones are actually plugged into the Mac.
Okay. So one thing about interfaces that I recommend to people, and this actually works with USB microphones as well. Like if you use a USB microphone, usually the microphone itself will have a little headphone jack on it. So when you use a USB mic or a USB audio interface, I always recommend using that as your input device, meaning you plug your mic into it, or it is a microphone. And then for your headphones, plug your headphones into that same interface. And then on your computer, you basically tell your computer that all the input and output from your computer should go through the interface. And then that way your mics go in through the interface, and then any monitoring through your headphones is going to come out through the interface. Because when you do what you're doing, right, you have a mic plugged into the Scarlett 4i4, but yet you're monitoring from your computer itself. That makes it a little more confusing, and there's more chance for something like this to happen, right? Where you only hear one ear. Yeah.
I mean, we can give it a little.
Yeah, you want to try that live?
Let's see. Can we?
The iPad's dying. All right, bye, Barry. Everyone say bye to Barry.
It's a mess.
Barry. All right. Anyway,
it seems unwilling to allow me to.
Okay.
Change my settings during the call, but
okay. Yeah. We'll leave it then. So. Yeah, but I agree. Audio it's not easy. It's not simple. And there are a lot of companies who come out with either, like a USB microphone that just solves everything. And like, it still doesn't. Like, there's still a bunch of stuff. And forget about live streaming. I mean, I've recently started live streaming and trying to use OBS and things like that. And it's like, that's a whole nother level of weirdness. Live streaming.
Indeed.
So, all right. So let's step back to your microphone, the M88TG. I looked it up. It's a hypercardioid microphone, which is cool because, as long as you keep your mouth right in front of it, it'll pick up your mouth very well. It'll pick up your voice very well, but it'll sort of reject a lot of the other noise in the room and a lot of the other reflections in the room. So that's that seems like a pretty cool mic. And it's a kick drum mic, you said.
Well, I mean, it's frequently used as a kick drum mic. I'm under the impression that this microphone is not ideal for podcasting, but it is neutral in a sense. You know, it's something that I regard as capturing, because of its flat equalizer response, the actual sound and like directly next to it.
Right.
And then I can play with it in post.
Right.
You know, so when I'm recording music, I throw, you know, pretty heavy envelopes on it. For podcasting, you know, the Scarlett luckily has the option has an air mode. You know,
nice.
it kind of rolls off the low end. And I think that's very helpful here because, you know, people who are used to listening to like a Beta 58 or that kind of thing, you know, these are mics that have been tuned for a particular mid-range response. So,
right.
You know, but I would prefer to capture the entire sound.
Right. So you are using the air button right now. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And actually that air button, by the way, Focusrite is my only sponsor of the show by design. But that air button, actually, it doesn't reduce any low frequencies. What it does is it adds some high frequency clarity.
Aha.
Yeah. Aha.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So it's like maybe 10K and above, or maybe even 12K and above. Like it's really the air. That's what we call those frequencies, you know, 12 to 14K and up. That's the air frequencies. It's like, it's so fine and I want to say smooth. I don't know how to describe those frequencies, but it's really fine and it really just adds that little bit of fine clarity. Really cool. On some mics. Now, the air button, you shouldn't just, for those people listening, you shouldn't just use the air button on everything, right? Because some mics don't need it, and if you use it, it'll make it too bright. It'll add too much high end, and then it'll sound harsh and slightly annoying. So you don't want that.
Yeah. Forgive me. I must have confused this functionality with the Shure PG USB 42. I think, which was like the last time I tried a USB podcasting mic, that they had a roll off, like a low end roll off.
Oh yeah.
On that mic that I kind of equivalated.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's a Shure, what was it? A PG 42?
Yeah. The PG 42 USB.
Okay. Right. And okay. So it has a low frequency.
But that's like that's a very different instrument. Like that's a open capsule, as I recall.
Oh,
and
like a omnidirectional, you mean?
But it had a switch on it where you could like duck all of the low end.
Right. You could roll.
And I used that for a while.
Okay.
Once upon a time.
Yeah. Yeah, those low end roll off switches can be very handy. The RE20 has one. I think even the SM7B has one, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while. Yeah, so the M88TG is what you're using now, dynamic microphone, hypercardioid, and you're obviously pretty close to it. And you don't have, do you have a little foam windscreen on it or anything like that?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, because even with that, and this is classic. This is what happens with pretty much all microphones. First of all, the manufacturers sell you the microphone, and they tell you, we put a foam windscreen inside the mic. So, but they don't actually come out and say, well, you don't need a windscreen. They don't say that, but because it's not true, they can't say that. So even though they have their own internal windscreen, when you buy a mic, usually you put your own windscreen on top of it. But even with that, some of the plosives still get through. But because some mics are just sensitive like that. So on your voice live, talking to you live, I do hear some, minor plosives, but I'm going to get rid of that in post-production with, the iZotope RX, the D plosive. Just they're mild, but yeah, it's there. So
right on.
Yeah. So but it's good you're using a windscreen because that removes 80 or 90% of the plosives. And it's good you're close to the mic too. So thank you for that.
Certainly.
That's what do you have to usually tell all your guests to stay close to the microphone like the rest of us have to do every day of our lives?
I mean, I don't actually.
Oh.
Strangely.
Oh, good.
Strangely. I mean, that particular request to speak into the microphone is actually more of a problem for the stuff that I've done with live events.
Oh.
More like panel discussions. I've done several episodes of my own independent show, Future Fossils, on the road. Where we've hosted at conferences and festivals. We've done panels, and that's the point where people they forget because they're holding the microphone.
Oh, right.
And the arm just drifts. And people are thinking, and it's like, oh no, it's like you really need to eat it. Mm-hmm. Eat it right. Like you're licking a lollipop. Please, for the love of God.
Some sound guys tell the people to literally touch the mic to their chin and keep it there. I've never done that, and I don't know how that would work, but apparently that's what some sound guys will tell the people that.
I mean, that's I don't think iZotope has a D-beard.
Well, they got a D Russell. That's close, but yeah, no.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about your Scarlett 4i4, which, because it has an air button, that means it's a second gen, right?
Yep.
Okay. So now you got your M88TG plugged into it. How high is your preamp cranked? Because one of the things about the Scarlett is that, they're not the most powerful preamps in the world. I mean, they're good and they're very clean. So how much do you have to crank up the preamp there?
I'm at 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Cool. Yeah. And on my end, your level, it might be a little low, but here's the thing about recording. Like, if you're just recording, you can record it at a decent level and then just boost the gain later. But if you're broadcasting live, that's different. Then you need the gain right now. So that's why the Scarlett usually works out, even if people don't have a gain booster, like a cloud lifter or a Fed head. Some people have those things, but yeah, very clean. And so you got that recently. You got your Scarlett 4i4 this year, 2020?
Last year, I think, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I do tend to, you're right that the first couple episodes of Complexity, people were calling in with problems because certain podcast distributor apps involve auto compression algorithms that were the output that I was putting out in the first few episodes. And I think you and I talked about this over email actually early on. Maybe the first few episodes were too quiet, and I didn't realize that there were international loudness standards. And so I had to look for, it turns out that there's a plugin. And so actually, to their credit, Ableton has a make it loud compressor preset.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of my, post-production workflow is, just the template for my editing queue is to run it through that so that I don't worry too much about recording volume, and it comes out really clean. Now, we stopped getting those emails about a year ago.
Good. Yeah. No, I like that though, because like, look, okay. Whenever anyone starts doing a podcast, there's a learning curve, like for everyone. So it's like if you can get the feedback and correct correct things quickly, that's the best thing you can do, and that's what you did. So that's great.
Yeah.
So Ableton Live, the Make It Loud preset. I need to hear that. I want to hear that. Okay, so Ableton Live. So you record directly into Ableton Live, right?
Well, it depends. Like,
okay,
for the, like you're using Squadcast. I use Squadcast now.
Okay.
Also, for both complexity and for future fossils.
Okay.
And I like that because it is hugely important. The Zoom calls is just a nightmare. Even if you do everything you can on a Zoom recording, turn on original audio, it's amazing working with renowned, world-leading scientists and having to explain to them how to dig through the audio preferences menu on Zoom after 6 months. You think that I actually hosted a music night at SFI, virtual kind of is a kind of concert event, and it was an enormous challenge because everyone was so confused about how to actually create concert audio through the video call format.
Oh, right.
Is disastrous. Because Zoom, I don't know if it's a noise reduction or what, but it will attenuate the volume of things. So we had one of our players was playing a song and it just got quieter and quieter and quieter. And because the algorithm was attuning to filtering out background noise and just assumed that the music was noise and was gradually filtering it out until he just faded away. And we were watching him play the piano and we couldn't hear anything. And we were like, what the hell is going on? And it took this whole thing to realize that, so, lesson learned. But the joy of Squadcast specifically is the obviously, as you know, the multiple local recordings, right. And that's so key. Before I started with Squadcast, and you're doing this here too. Also, you suggested I make a local recording with the Apple voice memos. So, just redundancy.
Yeah.
And local recordings. This is where the conversation gets meta, because this is actually about resilience and about the distribution of strain in a network. And this is where we actually enter the domain of the stuff that we talk about on Complexity Podcast.
Sweet. I love this.
But so that's how do you spread things out so that you don't have just one fail point,
right.
Because it's absolutely awful where when you get into a situation where you've only got one audio file and one person's mic is out of balance or something, and then you have to go in and edit it by hand.
Oof.
Oh yeah. I've spent so much time doing that on Future Fossils, using Ecamm call recorder.
Okay.
Originally, when I was, before, that was my initial approach with that show, and they have a multi-channel output, but at any rate, it's sometimes also the on-site recordings with a Zoom H2n or H4n.
Right.
And so you end up with these, it's just, again, like I said, it's, it's like field biology, it's, sometimes the specimen gets a little dinged up on the way in, and you have to do a little reconstruction.
Wow. The analogy is so great. I love it. The resiliency and the field biology, because that's what it is. Wow. So yeah, when you brought up when two voices are recorded on one track and then their volumes are different, the tone, the EQ is different, and then to try to even them out and make them sound good together that's rough. And I bet every podcast editor listening to this has done that multiple times. And yeah, it's tedious, and many times you can't even create a good final product because it's so bad. Like, you could work on it for 20 hours and it would still be, it's not that great. It's kind of bad because what's the word? You're handcuffed. You can't do much. So yeah, that's why Squadcast is great. And Zencaster's another one that's good.
Agreed. Yeah. I had an interview on Future Fossils with Taryn Southern, who's a fascinating human being. She, among other, she wrote music in collaboration with artificial intelligence. She directed a film called I Am Human about brain implants and the way that transhumanism is occurring through the medical field. Helping people with quadriplegics and people with Parkinson's and other kind of neurological disorders, and using electronic regulation of the human nervous system. And so it was especially ironic that our interview happened over Zoom and was plagued with audio issues that, just tiny little clips that even the iZotope repair suite wasn't able to completely scrub. Just little blips in the audio. And it's what do you do with those recordings when you're done with them? Because it's an amazing conversation. And yet, you're going to hear these little pops and clicks every, few seconds at best.
Right.
And it's trashed. So, yeah, I've been sitting on that conversation now for practically 8 months, and wondering, I guess at that point, it's a Patreon exclusive,
Okay. Right,
It's what do you do? You're okay, for true fans only, this is we're sorry that it came out like this, but here it is anyway.
Yeah, I hear you. And wait, with your iZotope, do you have iZotope standard or professional, or just the Elements? 6. Oh, you have RX6 standard. So wait, you probably have a D-Click in there.
I do, yeah, okay. but D-Click is not.
Didn't cut the mustard.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's those tools are. It's like a scraper or something. You can scrape too much, and screw up the wall.
Totally.
It's very easy to overdo a de-reverb, and suddenly it sounds like somebody is talking through a paper towel tube.
Yeah.
And
totally.
So what do you I admire, for example, Gordon White is one of these people who, on his podcast Rune Soup, makes small apologies at the beginning for audio problems. He's listen, we had a little trouble in the first 10 minutes. We got to sort it out.
Right.
But he's transparent about that. And I think that's the best we can do. This is, again, it's, in a way, I like to think about it as you're out there on the frontier of something, or in the wilderness. Again, with the field biology metaphor, we're making the best with what we've been given. And it's a weird time in history, because on the one hand, we do have, there's the sense that the laptop is the musical instrument that superseded the piano. The sense of the iPad is like the sense that everything has become accessible, the sense that the gates have opened, that everyone can do this. But at the same time, everything is developing so rapidly. The networks themselves are developing rapidly. The networks themselves are constantly subject to, fluctuations in traffic and in routing failures. And I mean, Billie Eilish can go and record on an AT2020, and like win a Grammy on that. And that's legit, I mean, that was the mic I recorded my first home studio album on. But, it's there's contingencies.
Yeah.
There's turbulence in this world. And I think it just people are generally pretty receptive to the fact that not every single human being producing audio content is capable of meeting the standards of a professional multi-million-dollar studio, which is to say that your work and the work that people like you are doing to help spread literacy about how to make this stuff easier for people is really helpful. It's really key.
Yeah, I feel you I feel a lot of what you just said, and I often am very impatient in many ways because I see a lot of the new technology, and like I also sort of in my own mind I see what could be done with it, but like no one's doing it. Like I'm a creative person. Like for instance, I use all kinds of plugins and software, and I go crazy with that stuff in post-production to really mix it. Because when I produce a podcast episode, I mix it like a song, like a record. Like in my mind, that's what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, this is the song in quotes, and I'm gonna mix this thing so it's freaking awesome, and it goes out into the world and people can love it. And so I use all different plugins, and there are so many. And I've had this idea that I could somehow come up with a plugin chain, like a chain of plugins that I use, and that I could introduce a little AI in there to maybe tweak some of the settings, and then just have it like almost like a black box where people can put in their audio, and out the other end comes this audio that's way, way better, right? And so like that's what I have in mind, but like how to do that, I have no idea. I mean, if I had $30 million, I could hire a team to work on it or something. I don't know, but I don't know anything. So the point is that a lot of people have ideas about how to improve things and make things better, but it's just not possible. Like what I mean is the change is going to happen very slowly, even though it doesn't have to, but somehow, I don't know. That's the way things change in the world. They don't change quickly, it seems. So guys like me who have these crazy ideas, like I want to do this tomorrow, it's like it's just not going to happen. Does that make any sense, Michael?
Yeah,
Oh, we lost them. It says I disconnected. Yeah, that's weird. Okay. Anyway, but we're still rolling and we're still good. Yeah.
So yeah, in Future Fossils, the framing of that show is just where are we in the deep time kind of cosmological sense of things as human beings, looking beyond our humanity and into our relations with everything else. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about our relationship between the human and the machine. And I think specifically about artificial intelligence and the synthesis of media. I spent a lot of time thinking about deepfakes. But like one of the key pieces that, you're talking about using AI as a as a audio filter, EQ processor type format.
Right.
But let's take it a step further into vocal synthesis. You can take a 5-second sample of someone's voice and clone their voice now, thanks to a Google project that I think was built on top of advances made by like Adobe and NVIDIA. And if you can imagine taking just the transcript of an email conversation and being able to render it into a natural sounding audio conversation.
Right.
That's possible. Everything that we're talking about is in some sense about to be obviated by these text to speech technologies that will allow you to, another thing is I think it was 2013, around that time, Google bought Motorola for their patents primarily. And one of the patents was for a temporary tattoo. It's like a patch, like a nicotine patch type thing, but it was a chip that allowed the sub-vocalization. So you can read the movement of the muscles in your throat and translate them into a text message. So this is being used I think the first use case was soldiers in the field of combat, being able to communicate with one another silently,
right,
so that you can just articulate the words you want to say to someone and it'll show up in someone's heads up display in their helmet. But combine that with the voice cloning thing, and we could all be doing podcasting in bed silently with no microphones at all, and it just sounds that never actually happened, and it's speech synthesis, So
wow.
that's where I see this headed. And then at that point, all of these, as long as someone is willing to permit whatever weird, monstrous, opaque algorithm the opportunity to voice clone them, then we'll be able to do podcasts with impeccable sound,
right?
Because it was made out of nothing,
right? Yeah, no, that's a wonderful idea. And yeah, the whole thing with vocal synthesis now is that because there's a platform called Descript. Have you heard of that one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like an audio editor, but now it's a video editor. Descript is amazing for many reasons, and there's a bunch of AI apparently that you can.
Do you use it?
I do not use it currently, and I probably won't. But it's great, and people love it. Mostly for taking out ums and ahs. That's what Steve Stewart and Brian Ensminger have told me, that it does a lot, but just automatically taking out the ums and ahs it just saves them a lot of time. So that's good. So Descript can learn your voice. You have to talk to it for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then it'll learn your voice, and then you can literally type in text and it'll voice the words in your voice. And it's pretty good. The problem is it's like that website Faux Rogan, where they made Joe Rogan's voice artificial, and it's at the top of the webpage. I think it's fauxrogan.com. At the top of the webpage it says, "Oh, see if you can tell which one's a computer and which one is really Joe." And okay, at this point it's easy to tell. It's not even that's easy. It's very clear that a computer is talking, and then it's very clear when Joe Rogan is talking. And what I think is missing is the twang. It's the way you say it. It's the delivery and the tone, the pitch and the tone, and going up and going down and all that stuff. That twang, I like to call it. I just called it now. I don't know. That's what's missing. So I don't know if there's a way to sort of synthesize words and then somehow add a natural twang to it so it actually sounds natural. Maybe that's what they're trying to figure out now. I don't know. Because if they solve that, then you're right. It's over. then I could just write questions and you could write your answers and we just make it audio. And although I know that's not the same though, of course.
It's not. And yet, in a world where we're talking about the production of, there are already deep fake news anchors, like video news anchors, you know, and the whole thing is getting automated. It does beg the question. I really do think that genuine audio, you know, that everything that you have devoted yourself to with the show is going to be like vinyl records in another decade.
Right.
You know, it's going to be something that we regard as precious because it was done by humans, but not necessarily. I mean, for example, Grimes just collaborated with, I forget the name of the company, Endel, on a music app for baby music, like nap time music. And she, you know, donated some samples of her voice and so on. And they use your latitude, longitude, and biometrics to determine when at different times of day, like different kinds of music you might want to stimulate or relax you. And this is one of many, many projects. Mubert is another one that's doing deep learning musical synthesis for different contexts, where like I can imagine it's already the case that Spotify has a score of dummy producer accounts where they have hired their own in-house people to produce stuff under aliases. And it's only a matter of time before it's just completely automated and music is just streaming out of a like data sonification of your own biometrics. So like your Apple Watch will pick up all your heartbeat and stuff, and you'll get, you know, oh, do you want to hear that as like an Irish folk tune or whatever? Or do you want to hear it as like modular synth ambient? And everyone will just be able to customize their soundscapes that in a weird way. It'll be like an audio mirror of your own, you know, whatever you feed it.
Yeah.
And at that point, you know, I had this, I interviewed looping violinist, songwriter Kishi Bashi for Performer magazine a few years ago. And he was having this, he was a graduate of Berklee School of Music, and was saying, yeah, he's at the point where he's like, yeah, we're going to be playing music with our brains and with computers. You know, that's already being done. People are using, you know, brain reading headbands, linking them up to synths. And at some point, it's going to be this completely effortless thing to generate music. At that point, there's going to be a kickback, and people are going to become genuinely interested in the mastery of instruments, because it's a completely different thing to be embodied in music, you know, to actually play the guitar, to hold the thing in your hands and strum it, you know, rather than to just like sit there and think about the most awesome concert you can imagine and it just happens, you know? And so it's weird what happens when like this stuff just becomes completely super abundant and available, and how that places a premium on the work. It inverts everything in a very curious way.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually thought of that, a similar idea before, like monitoring someone's like mood and vital signs and all that, and then somehow translating that into music. But the other thing about all this, everything you were just talking about, the other thing is, if that becomes possible and starts to become viable for many people to try and do it, if like the deep learning musical synthesis that you were talking about, if when it starts out, if it sounds like rubbish, that's going to be bad, because then people are going to be like, oh, this is just garbage. This is like, you know, do whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like in order to sort of launch that type of thing, you have to, it would have to be raised to such a level that it actually has value and it's worth something. Like, you know, because of the vocal synthesis problem right now, it's like, you can sort of tell when it's fake still, and that ruins it. So same thing with the music, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you've heard of OpenAI's Jukebox project, but they did this. One deep learning net created a set of lyrics, and another deep learning net created a musical accompaniment based on the live performances of Elvis Presley. And it, like, I mean, they've done several different examples, but this one really caught me because it was a song that sounded like an Elvis song, all like 95%. I mean, you could tell it was something was a little off, but it was compelling down to even like the crowd noise. Huh. And it was a song about, like, you know, from the dust to the digital, like this thing about how this thing wrote its own song about how it crawled, you know, it came up from nothing and became aware, and, you know, here it is. And it was very disturbing and exciting, like these technologies tend to be. And I think about it in terms of, like, I don't know if you have any kids. I have a daughter. She was born, you know, she looks like a little, like when a child is first born, they're just this like wrinkled, weird, like peanut of a thing, right? You know, it's kind of, they're glorious and amazing, and yet kind of like gross and weird. And so, I mean, that's kind of how I see this, is like, you know, if we look at it in that way, the technologies that are being birthed right now are going to come out really awkward at first. And so that's why it takes people with vision, you know, people who understand that this is something that's going to mature over time, to be the early adopters, and to, you know, to deal with the screaming and the diapers, basically.
Right. Yeah. And then whatever technology and systems that are created, like, usually the best end product comes when it's a marriage between a human being and the technology. You can't, you could, but it's best if you don't cut out the human entirely. Like, you got to have some humanness in there. Same thing with, like, you know, drum machines and stuff, right? That's not human, but then you have people playing real instruments over the drum loop, and then you have a real singer singing. That's a good combination, right? It's not just all computer, it's human and computer.
Yeah. And actually that's true in the world of chess. You know, everybody remembers Deep Blue beating Garry Kasparov in the 90s.
Right.
But at that point, I guess people sort of lost touch with how things were progressing. And what has happened since is that chess championships have become about human computer symbiosis. And so there are teams they call centaurs, that are teams that are humans collaborating with AI to defeat other teams of people collaborating with AI.
Right.
And I mean, that's a very natural consequence of the way that this is all going. And that's really what this looks like. I mean, even if you look at, like, down to the very basics, the beginning of this conversation is that, you know, a microphone is a way of amplifying, transforming, you know, decontextualizing. You know, we're sitting here in the wake of, and completely saturated by, the miracle of audio recording technology, and completely take for granted the fact, and this is another thing that I talked about with Kishi Bashi at Performer Magazine, I think in 2017, which is just that, you know, we live in this world where we can listen to whatever we want, whenever and wherever we want it. And that was unthinkable 150 years ago. You know, music was, to call something a site-specific installation or whatever, it was like, that was all there was, you know, and now you can, you know, exhume the ghost of Thriller wherever you want it.
Right.
And, you know, you'd be listening to Michael Jackson on the International Space Station, and nobody thinks that's unusual.
Right. Yeah, I'm really enamored by technology and the pushing forward of technology, especially in audio. I've had ideas for literally 20 years now to make a fractal music generator, because I discovered fractals in the late 90s online, and I just love fractals and all that stuff. And then I thought, well, could you apply it to music? And there's a lot of people who've tried to make fractal music generators, but really most of them are just random music generators, which is obviously not nearly the same thing. But I would love, again, if I was like a billionaire, that's what I'd be working on every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all right, well, let's cover a few more audio things, because I was curious about, I know it's kind of weird to transition back to podcast production, but let's do it real quick because we're almost out of time anyway. The Yeti Nano is the mic that you've been dropping the mic off at some local guests' houses, and it's so the Yeti Nano, that's a USB mic, right? So they can just sort of plug it in and be ready to go.
Yep, you can hear that one on Scott Otrtman episode of Complexity Podcast, which was just a couple weeks ago, and that was cool because he was just in town for a research project for a couple weeks and across town, and I was just able to go over there, and it was like being a spy, get just like a dead drop it at his place, pick it up later. It's like Grubhub delivery where, you never even see the delivery driver. It's really weird and alienating, but then at least you get to go on to the call itself and see their smiling face and establish a human rapport in the whatever limited ways we're capable of in this strange, disinfected dystopia we're in.
Oh, wow. It is really strange. So strange. And then your headphones, you said you're wearing Beats Studio Pros. You like those?
I do. Yeah. Although, I would like there to be, I don't know. I'm pretty satisfied with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those are Bluetooth as well as corded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm using them corded right now.
Okay.
I wish that there were more control over the noise cancellation. I know other headphones offer the opportunity to turn that stuff on and off, but to my knowledge, these don't.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. And also, what about the quality? Like when you have the Beats Studio Pro headphones hardwired versus Bluetooth, do you hear a difference?
Not really. I mean, I generally don't like Bluetooth headphones.
Okay.
Like I must be I'm some sort of weird holdover. I generally I like them for there not being a cord that my child can grab, right, and like yank at, But other than that, or being able to get up and walk around is nice. I'm a huge fan of mobility. I worked for years as a painter on the festival circuit while I was also playing music at the same events. The idea of having lamps for your easel that are battery powered, like the 1,000 lumen work lamp,
right,
that you can just drop, and that's easy now. You can grab those at Home Depot. That was a dream in 2007. Oh. It was such a pain in the ass to try and find a wall outlet far enough away from the mains that you didn't have to wear earplugs while you were painting at a concert.
Oh,
this is, but now you can set up wherever you want. And like the idea that, I've been on that same tip with musical performance. I just switched my, I like I said, I run a very looping heavy concert setup, and my guitar pedal board is now entirely battery powered. And that's beautiful because I can run a battery powered looping rig through a battery powered amplifier, and I can do this wherever I want. Whereas like before, until a year ago, it was inconceivable that I would be able to set up something so technologically intricate anywhere but 6 feet from a plug.
Right.
So
that's cool. So, all right, we're coming to the end. This has been awesome. I want to quickly just talk about some of these books that have really inspired me, and they're right in your field of complexity. And maybe you can suggest a book to me that I have not read in the genre, because I'm, if there's a classic book on complexity or chaos or fractals, I want to read it. So I was I was telling you before we started recording that Chaos is my favorite book of all time. It's called Chaos: Making a New Science by James Gleick. And he wrote it in the mid 80s or even early 80s. I think it was like 83 or 84 or something like that. And he wrote it's about all the guys in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Well, even before that, but up through the 70s that were learning about chaos and, experimenting and stuff like that. So what would you say some of your favorite books are on the subject?
Well, I mean, I will give a shout out to SFI external professor. Actually, she's the Davis Professor of Complexity at SFI now, Melanie Mitchell at Portland State University. She just wrote a book called Artificial Intelligence, A Guide for Thinking Humans. She was a student of Douglas Hofstadter, who wrote Gödel, Escher, Bach. And, he's a hugely influential philosopher and computer scientist. And she has been studying this field for over 30 years and has seen wave after wave of hype. For people who are like either excited or terrified about the stuff we've been talking about in this episode, her book really gets into what AI, as it's currently understood, is capable of and what it's not capable of. And her main thing is about conceptual abstraction, like what it is for a human being to actually think, because we can't make machines that think until we can make humans, until we understand what it is to think, and so we still really don't.
Right.
And
put it simply, yes.
Yeah. But at the same time, there are, this idea of conceptual abstraction is really handy because it's about, for example, her big example is, AlphaGo can beat the human Go master, but it can't take what it knows about Go and apply it to like Parcheesi or Risk, and it can't analogize. And, she's been testing OpenAI's GPT-3 algorithm, which is the natural language algorithm that was released recently, that's been writing blogs and code and poetry and music and all this stuff. And it's amazing. And it's got a lot of people worried that they're scheduled for demolition, basically. But at the same time, it's still not, according to her and a few other people that have been looking into this, it's still not capable of doing some basic cognitive functions that like a 2-year-old can do.
Yeah.
And so, her book has been really helpful. It's illuminating in both the history of AI development, how long this has really been going on, because it's been going on since the 50s. It's crazy.
Right.
And to look at how it's developed over time, how the thinking has changed about it, the different channels that research has gone down, and then the challenges that remain. And it's very sobering. It's a very, in a way, I found it a relief to read this book, which is very accessible because it really, strips away all of the drama and hyperbole that the news platforms inject into this conversation. And of course, like the whole field is just saturated by hype because it's so money. Right. There's so much that, like we're capable of doing this, so give us billions of dollars.
Right. And
so she's like, well, like let's actually like talk about what this is and is not doing.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful piece of work. So I'd recommend that one for sure.
What's the name of that book? Artificial Intelligence?
AI, A Guide for Thinking Humans by Melanie Mitchell. And we interviewed her on Complexity Podcast about that book also back in the spring. Although that was, as did Lex Friedman for his AI podcast on YouTube, which I recommend to people. It's huge. And he did a very thorough and interesting interview with her as well.
And quick question, do you know of any AI apps for like, Android and Apple phones and stuff, like iPhones? Yes, I did say Apple phones, everybody. So go ahead and tweet that and make fun of me. All right. I don't have an iPhone. I have Android. But do you know of any apps, like AI apps, like chat apps? Because I've tried a few of these. It's like, ooh, it's your AI chat buddy. Talk to your AI friend. And like, I literally tried I tried 3 of them because I wanted to give it a fair shot. And all 3 of these apps were literally useless. Like, I'd ask a question and they'd be like, like just the responses were incoherent. Like everyone was incoherent. Do you know of any decent ones, or are they still struggling with that?
Well, I know that people have set up, not for mobile devices, but I know that people have set up websites. I mean, I'm sure they exist, but I know that there are websites out there where people have an instance of GPT-3 running, and you can have a conversation with that. And you can have a conversation with different versions of it. Like, they can train it on the corpus of a particular text, like all of the writing of Alan Watts, for fans of the movie Her, for example. And so you can have a conversation with something that sounds like it's Alan Watts. I actually had a bizarre encounter. One of my friends had a copy of GPT-3 and had me interviewing myself. I didn't bother to release that because it very quickly. He said he'd never seen it do this before, but somehow my own sort of recursive weirdness caught this thing in a death spiral that he'd never seen before, where it said, "I am a thinking machine. I am a thinking machine," like over and over and over and over, and he just had to kill it.
Oh, that's great. We need to hear that, and you need to put music under that, Michael.
We should use the vocal synthesis to make it sound like it's just me talking to me. But there are plenty of apps that are that this kind of thing is finding its way into lots of stuff, like Photoshop Camera now, which is able to just automatically edge detect and replace the sky, for example. Or you can change. This is bizarre, but like they're using smart filters now in Photoshop. You can change your age or your ethnicity.
Oh man,
and there's, like I said, Mubert is a music generator app. There are plenty of others that are using AI style transfer, like PixArt, to render was it Prisma, that are, you can like turn your photo into a Van Gogh.
Oh,
that kind of thing. So yeah, there's lots of that stuff out there. And I mean, I was contacted recently by Reface, which is, swap your face into a movie. So that like you can replace the actors in a film with your own face, and like kind of reciprocal inverse cosplay or whatever. I don't know about chat apps though. I remember sometime in the 90s, real early on, finding one of the earliest chat bots and being captivated by it. But I kind of lost my interest in that stuff a long time ago. It's like, it's more interesting to talk to people.
Totally. All right, so everybody go check out Michael Garfield's show, Complexity. It's great. And also his other show, Future Fossils. I will link to all that in the show notes. And also I'll link to his music on Spotify. Okay, so check out his music. And this has been great, Michael. I mean, I there's so much else I wanted to talk about, but I'm glad we got to talk probably about half the time about podcast production and equipment and stuff, and then the other half of the time about all these other cool topics, which are also relevant to audio production, as you mentioned throughout our conversation. So this has been great, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Chris. It's an honor to sit at the feet of someone who's been doing this a lot longer than I have, and clearly knows what he's doing a lot better than I do. and yeah, thanks for folding me in.
Yeah, well, happy to help. And normally I play music, and normally we yell sound great. Like we literally yell like at the top of our lungs over the music. But because my iPad died, maybe we can both... Yeah, I don't know what we'll do. Maybe I'll just yell and you can react. All right, but everyone, thank you for listening to this episode of the Podcast Engineering Show. Check out Michael Garfield. All the links are in the show notes. If you have any questions, definitely ping me, especially if it's like questions about your own podcast production. Just go to podcastengineeringschool.com and there's a contact page. You could just send me questions or send me a note. Or I even have a page where people could send me cryptocurrency. Oh, yeah, baby. Michael, we should have talked about crypto.
Oh, yeah. Another time.
Another time. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Michael Garfield, I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. I'm going to yell, and then you can react to my yell, okay? Let's do that. Let's end that way. Sound great!
All right. I think I will do my best.